Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wookieecast. Today we're here with Brandon Wainerdi. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today. Um, this interview is about the new Starfighters and Encyclopedia of Starfighters and other vehicles. And he has also worked on several other Star Wars works. So thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
I'd love to get into a little bit of whether you have any favorite starships from Star Wars that perhaps you got introduced to as a child when you were first watching the franchise.
Ooh, that's a great question. My favorite growing up was the B-Wing, mostly because it started the same letter as my name. That was the main important piece of information about that fighter when I was 6 years old. Since then, and early on as well, one of the things I loved was Star Tours, and this is actually a ship that is not in the book, so I shouldn't talk about it. But the Star Speeder is one of my favorites. And so I've always been drawn to it, and it was really fun to kind of put a lot of these together in one book.
Did you ever do any of the old Legends sort of books that had, I guess, ships in them or anything like
Oh,
that?
for sure. And I don't know if you can see behind me, these sagging shelves behind me. I still have them all my original copies of, especially DK. I mean, if you think about the early 90s when I grew up as a Star Wars fan, what DK was putting out in the nonfiction space, specifically for kids my age, was the dream, was the Bible, really, of what Star Wars is, of whether it was the incredible cross sections or the visual dictionaries or the combinations of all of those. Um, I just remember like pouring through those diagrams, those illustrations, and especially the cross sections, and then also there's the location books are just beautiful. Like those are just works of art, and I think so detailed and so intricate. And that tone, that writing style, which is actually developed by Dr. David West Reynolds in the original Visual Dictionary, um, is still something that we continue as kind of a guide all these years later, like what the tone is, what the voice is, and what we're trying to convey.
Really interesting. I'd love if you could talk about your collection a little bit. I've just started eyeing it in the
Oh,
background.
sure. Yeah, let's see. I can
How you
even
got into bit collecting,
Yeah,
probably as a
let's
fan at
see.
first.
Here's even more up there, and I'll move it back down. Yeah, a lot of these books are the books that I read as a kid. And you can even see if people are watching this on video, you can see this sagging shelf right there that is going to kill me. One day, Wikipedia will update my entry and like Brandon was killed by this shelf, which is great. It was just how I should go. Um, but I started collecting and reading these probably when I was my first Star Wars book was twofold. One, um, the Phantom Menace novelization, Terry Brooks. My dad bought it for me at like a Walmart, and they were like, "I don't think you know how to read this," and I did. So I think I was six then. The other book that I read was Young Jedi Knights. I believe it was Return to Ord Mantell. So it was like halfway through the series. And again, I was probably a little too young to read it, not in terms of content, but just in terms of like sentence structure and how books are written. But that really kind of set me off. I read pretty much everything. And I think even still today, I've read pretty much every single thing that has ever come out as a Star Wars book across most mediums. And so I kind of just grew up first reading the Scholastic young adult books and children's books, and then really just escalated from there. And my school library growing up, middle school and high school, bought every single Star Wars book. And so that was during New Jedi Order, that was during Legacy of the Force, that was all of that. And so I just read everything. A few friends of mine, we all just read everything all the time. And I would read it during class, I'd read it at my desk. And it still means the world to me. Star Wars and the actual publishing side of Star Wars, I think, is really magical compared to any other franchise, really.
I can relate with your comment about the shelf because I had two shelves fall out on me recently. They had
Oh
all of High
no.
Republic on them and they
Oh
decided
no,
to
no,
leave
that's
the
a
wall.
nightmare.
So
Okay. I installed these myself, so if anything happens, it's me to blame. So,
Hmm. How did you come to be involved with this particular encyclopedia?
yeah. I've been very lucky, and I mean, we've talked about it a little bit on Wikipedia in the past and in other interviews. I had been doing my own podcast when Last Jedi came out. I was really inspired by Last Jedi and just I was kind of like reinvigorated and I was like, I wonder if there's any other Star Wars podcasts. I used to listen to them as a kid. There were quite a few and then kind of fell out of it a little bit. And I found this podcast called Blast Points, which there was this article on AV Clip that was like, if you love the minutia of Star Wars. You will love this podcast." I was like, "Well, I love the minutia of Star Wars. That's right." And so I listened to like 50 episodes of theirs over a Christmas break, and I decided I wanted to do a Star Wars podcast, and that became Talking Bay 94, which is a one-on-one interview podcast, very similar to this. I did that for a few years, and then during the pandemic, I transcribed a few of those interviews and pitched them to Star Wars Insider, and that was my initial foray into official Star Wars publishing. And then from there, editors really took a chance on me with both Insider and with StarWars.com. And then last year, the Star Wars Encyclopedia came out through DK as well. And after I was wrapping that project, they reached out to me and wanted to know if I liked spaceships and if I wanted to tackle a book for them. And so it was really an honor to get that call. You never expect to get anything, and so whenever you get that email or that call, it is really exciting, and it ended up being a really really fun project.
Out of curiosity for some of our viewers, we're not always too familiar with how long something takes from perhaps when it's pitched to you
Yeah,
to when it finally comes out on the shelf. So how long were you working on it, would
that's a
you
great
say?
question. I could probably pull up my email if like when was the first time I got that email. It took about a year. From me getting that call to then me turning in the final draft earlier this year. And then obviously it takes a long time for a book
Ju-
like this to be published. So yeah, about a year, year and a half from start to finish. And this is obviously slightly less of a lift in terms of um canon, and all these things that might need to be entertained and addressed. And so that was about the same amount of time as the encyclopedia. Maybe that was a little bit more from start to finish, but that's kind of the at least current way that I've been working.
That's really interesting. Um, for this book, did you have a different approach with the entries that you were updating, so to say, versus the ones that you were writing from scratch?
That's a great question. Yeah, because I do want to say this book it existed before, right? There was a writer named Landry Q. Walker, who's a great a comic artist or comic writer and a really interesting guy. And I believe it was the Journey to the Last Jedi, that kind of publishing initiative, that he initially wrote. The actually it might have been a Journey to Force Awakens, but he wrote I think it was 2018, Starfighters and Other Vehicles Encyclopedia. And so there are quite a few that are untouched in the book that he wrote. Landry Q. Walker wrote and wrote them very well. And then there were quite a few that, I mean, imagine since 2018, what has happened in the Star Wars universe, right? Like even something like Boba Fett's ship, like things that did not necessarily have new canon um, moments needed to be updated. And so that was kind of looking at what was already there. And then the important part is you tell the full story of what this ship has gone through, what its owner has gone through, whatever it might be. And you kind of just make sure it's as holistic as possible on each page. And so it's a challenge for sure, but it's pretty fun to kind of just delve through and see what each ship has been through over the past 5 years, 6 years after that last book had come out. And then for new entries, it was just whole cloth. How I do it is I go through every single appearance published, shown on screen or whatever it is, and I kind of just write notes as I go and then compile at the end. But that way, it's all coming straight from the source. Um, but yeah, I really love the process though. It is really fun.
Yeah, we actually noticed, this is a Wikipedia thing. We noticed one or two things that made their way in from scripts that were never published or something.
Oh,
Did you have any help from Lucasfilm and perhaps squeezing a couple things in that I guess got
yeah.
published?
And I mean, if you have specific examples, I might be able to answer them case by
Uh,
case. But yeah, I always at least try, and maybe I won't know. Maybe you'll just have to cut it out because I won't have a good answer. But I always try because I love Legend so much because I um I understand the world to an extent, but I always, if there are question marks, I like to prod a little bit or I like to ask at least. And the story group and the editors are very, very good at answering those questions or being like, yeah, of course, here this is or whatever it is. And then sometimes I kind of just mark it in red and they take care of it as well. I kind of just let Star Wars be Star Wars and me, do what I can. But yeah, if you have a specific example, I
I
can see
do
if I could.
actually. So it's Jarek Yeager's ship.
Okay.
It's said to be a Zaxovian special. Jason Fry told us in a different interview that it was uh, in a script from Star Wars Resistance. We checked all of the scripts, or at least the finished ones. It wasn't there. So
Uh,
we had it kind of in this void of like, is this cut content? Is this true? And then it appeared in your book. So
so again, say
maybe
it again because I'm actually looking at least what I had written.
yes.
What was the thing that was
Um,
not in
Zach Sovian special. It's the model of Jared
oh,
Giger's ship.
sure. And I'll tell you right now, I wrote unknown. I'm looking at it right now. I wrote unknown, which means story group goes through and adds things. So that must have been,
Interesting.
yeah,
So they brought
s
it back from the
from a
cut
script.
Abyss.
Yeah,
Yeah, interesting. We had a yeah, that was one of the very interesting things that people were pointing out because
good. Yeah, no, I love that there's at least some additional canon and additional question marks. Because again, I'm always trying to make sure that everything is as detailed as possible, and that's always what I've loved growing up is just, the things in the past that might just be in the background, or like a cool design that like you only see in one episode or one shot or whatever it is. And Star Wars has always been that kind of place where you can really flesh something out and build something out, and it's really, really great.
did you have any favorite entries that you got to work on in particular? Favorite new entries because you obviously did a lot of research for each one of them.
Yeah. Let me look. Again, now I'm in the document. Let me see if there's any that really stick out to me because again, I don't think I pitched any this time. They came to me and just for reference, they give you a list of like, hey, here is everything that you will need to do. Here's a thing that's been approved, all these things. And then I kind of just go through and make sure that we're not missing anything major when they never do. They know what they're doing. Um, and so, I mean, things that are really fun for me to write. I mean, again, this book did not exist when the Razor Crest existed initially, right? And so even being able to like write that, which I think is like an iconic Star Wars ship and has already like set the tone, even though it was destroyed. Something like that is just a thrill to write when it's something that is big and you can imagine a 10-year-old kid going through it and finding that one immediately because that's their favorite ship. So yeah, that I would have to say Razor Crest or anything. I mean, again, things that did not exist 5 years ago that are now in this book. Each one was kind of a thrill for me to write um, because yeah, it's just kind of cutting it from whole cloth.
I'd love if you could talk about a little bit about, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the process itself, but ensuring or what's the process for ensuring there's a good spread of content from different media types? Because there's live action, there's animated, it's a
Yeah.
lot of different types of content there.
Yeah, and I mean again, it is kind not up to the author, but there's a general understanding that you try to hit from everything. You try like
Yeah.
again, if a ship has appeared in multiple mediums, it's almost it's beneficial for everybody, including the
Mhm.
author, but including everyone reading it to make it feel as lived in as real as possible, which means, if you look at the book, there are several opportunities to kind of plug that in, right? There's the main data section, right, with the length and the weapons and who made it. And then there's this kind of main paragraph. And then there are, I believe, two little subsections of little cheeky interludes, whatever it is. And those especially are the place that you can play around with other medium, or if it showed up somewhere like a fun thing that it did in a very specific moment. And it just makes everything feel um, so much more believable and lived in and makes the universe feel really, really big.
Yeah, because a lot of I know a lot of people just watch perhaps the live action stuff, but there's such a big world out there for, I don't know, like all the stuff from the Bad Batch probably made it
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, it did.
Um,
And again, it's because this is marketed a little bit more skewing to children or young adults, you do want to make it as approachable as possible, but also like pique their interest. I don't know about you, whenever I would read these books and I didn't like recognize something. I remember reading one of the books I loved the most was the New Essential Chronology, which is, I think, incredible books. Both that the original Essential Chronology and the New Essential Chronology, I think, were really incredible kind of feats. But I would read things. I'd be like, oh, that's so interesting. Let me go read that book and see what they're talking about. And I hope that, if someone sees something from the Clone Wars or from Bad Batch or from Resistance, I think Resistance is a great example because I really loved being able to put so many of those ships in the book. Um, because I don't think it ever got its own visual dictionary. Kind of similar to what you're talking about earlier. Like a
no, it
lot of the
never.
details necessarily were not included in its own research book. And so being able to plug those in because I think that show is great, that animation style is great, the characters are great. And so little things like that were a lot of fun to play around with and hopefully pique people's interest.
Yeah, it's funny. I know it's such a niche thing, but we actually did spend quite a lot of time discussing some of the Resistance pages and trying to interpret one of them. Maybe you can actually help with that
Maybe,
if
yes.
you
And
have
again,
it
if I
open.
if I don't know, I plead the fifth and cut it
Yeah,
out.
of
No, I'm just
course.
kidding.
I mean, it's the Fireball page. It has a little thing in parentheses. It says rumored. So we're trying to just is that rumored like in they don't know in universe, like the characters don't know, or is it like rumored?
Oh, who manufactured it? Is that what it?
And it's the engines.
It's
I
the
believe it's the
engine.
engines.
Let
And we
me
were like
see.
rumored. What does rumored
I'll
mean?
give
It's
you,
such
I
an
mean, I'll give
interesting.
you some. Oh, yeah, rumored mounted
Yeah.
Z75 head hunter engine. Yes. Whenever I, at least I put it, and if you're ever reading something of mine, that means that in universe, it's either kind of like whispered, like no one has like looked at it specifically, like why is it a certain way? Again, I think there might be something that says like curiously reminiscent of a T-65B X-Wing, right? Like it's things that and this is not, I guess, helpful for Wikipedia, but you give a little bit of wiggle, you give a little bit of um, mystery, especially surrounding something like the Fireball, where it's something that is super fast and super powerful. What makes it that fast? What makes it that powerful? Um, and again, if a storyteller hasn't explicitly said it, it's not my role to explicitly say, and so I almost again kind of want to raise questions rather than just like flat out answer something.
Interesting. I just figured to ask because there's been several like conflicting, I don't know, books or something about that.
Yeah.
So we were like, rumored.
Rumored. No,
Interesting.
hey, again, I'm making y'all's life a little bit harder. I love it.
Yeah, been a lot coming out this year, so
Yeah,
it's certainly very interesting. Um, what would you say is the most challenging part of writing a book like this?
it's a good. This is my first Star Wars book solo, with no one
Mm,
else working on it. That being said, the editing team was exceptional. The design team, obviously, exceptional. And so, like, I was never alone in it, but you don't necessarily have someone to bounce ideas off of on the writing side. And so that was a very interesting challenge, unique experience for me. But then again, this one was so design heavy, especially even compared to Encyclopedia or something, um, that it was a very much a collaboration with my incredible editors and then also the designer Chris Gold, who like crushed it. I think the book cover is beautiful. I think, not to say the 2018 one is bad, but you look at the differences and how he modernized and simplified the pages
mm.
inside. Really, really special.
Did you have any favorite facts that you learned while researching or writing from the book that you didn't perhaps know about a Star Wars ship?
Ooh, it's a good question too. One of the things, and similar to my encyclopedia work where I worked on a lot of Rise of Skywalker stuff, I think Rise of Skywalker really benefits from the visual dictionaries that have been put out that a lot of people maybe didn't read all the way or haven't really immersed themselves in, but I've really come to appreciate the lore and kind of story that is going on tangentially within Rise of Skywalker, and a lot of that has to do with how the Final Order and Sith Eternal fleets are described in these reference materials. Because in the movie, it's very visual heavy, it's very like ominous and all present, but it's not necessarily saying exactly like, oh, here's what makes it so dangerous, here's how it was built, all that thing. And so even just for my own personal, Star Wars knowledge, it's really cool for me to be able to put the pieces together from Shadow of the Sith and the Darth Vader comics and the novelization and the visual dictionary. And then you kind of like see this full, like, how did the Sith Eternal fleet happen? And so some of the ships that are in the book specifically about the Sith Eternal, I always try to fit in little like Ochi of Bestoon or like just like little things that might not
Yeah.
necessarily be apparent because the history is very rich and has been built out and I think will be continue to be built out. Even we've seen it in The Mandalorian, we've seen all these things that are kind of telling a side
Mm.
story, which I think is really interesting
Yeah, and I guess they're gonna have the movie set after Rise of Skywalker eventually, I
eventually.
believe. Yeah.
So
So, yeah, that's really interesting. Um, you mentioned that you were given kind of sort of a list of entries that would be included. Were there any that didn't quite make the final cut, perhaps because there wasn't enough to glean
that's a good
from there?
question. Nothing was taken out because there was no information. They
Okay.
provide the synopsis, and I believe it was all pretty much exactly what we did. We might have added a few more ships. I was writing it during the time of, I think Acolyte had just come out and Andor season two had not come out yet. But obviously, we had a few ships like penciled in. I believe the TIE Avenger was penciled in, and that was something at the very, very end that was written. And so nothing in terms of the synopsis changed necessarily. I think some things might have gotten cut over time, but not because there wasn't any information or anything like that.
Interesting. All books are different. I was talking with ST Bend about bestiary, and like some creatures, I guess, got paired off. So it's always very
Yeah,
interesting.
what's more sad? It's, creatures getting taken out of the book. Just a heartbreak.
Um, we do have to ask because we're Wikipedia, but do you have any favorite Easter eggs that you got to include in the book?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to, because like with the encyclopedia specifically, I did include certain things that maybe, and I would always mark them that were like kind of from legends. Like I worked on the General Kraken entry in the encyclopedia, and obviously he has a really robust West End Games history. And I just there's a tiny like aside parentheses of like his operatives or whatever, just stuff like that. I don't know if there was anything specifically in these. Um, I'm just kind of like, I haven't been in this folder in a long time, and so I'm just kind of like, oh, is there anything that like I was into? But really it was just more fun for me to kind of go through each one, revisit those moments, kind of see what's going on. Um, and then especially with actually a great one that I love that we haven't really talked about, and that it's not necessarily an Easter egg, but I love that it was included is the Crimson Firehawk, which is the ship from Young Jedi Adventures, which I just think is like a really fun, you get to both have these really iconic old ships from 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And then you also have these ships that like will mean a lot to kids later, right? In 15
Mm.
years, a kid's gonna be like, "Where's my Black Series Crimson Firehawk?" Like, and I think that's a really special thing that like Star Wars is ever changing, ever growing, and the generations grow with it. And this is one of the first examples that there was like an actual kid show made for Star
Mm.
Wars. Like, obviously, like droids and Ewoks, like sort of for kids, but this was like specifically for that preschool demographic, which is very, very special.
And speaking of Black Series, does wonders to does not do well for the budget. A lot of Wikipedians collect those, and I've heard
Oh
it's
yeah,
rough.
real
Um,
rough. You can tell, I've had to focus myself on books, and not as much toys.
one other entry that was also really cool that I saw, Jedi Vector, which is not
Hmm.
in any, I don't know, animated or visual media or anything, but it's definitely in those books.
Yes, and it is
So,
also, I believe, in the background of the Acolyte, in in an early episode, and then it appears in Young Jedi Adventures as well. And so uh, that was really fun for me because I actually had interviewed its original designer is a man named Warren Fu, who was a concept designer on the prequels, specifically Revenge of the Sith, and he designed General Grievous. And he was tasked then to design like what's the new Jedi ship, right? When they were trying to figure out the triangle, right? The Obi-Wan starfighter from Attack of the Clones. And his original design, you can go into the Art of Attack of the Clones, is just the Jedi Vector, which is like cool. And so then all these years later, they brought it back for High Republic, right? Because again, I think the world building of High Republic is really beautiful stuff. And then bringing in someone like Ian McCaig, again, prequel designer, someone so intrinsic to kind of like the Star Wars medium, they were so smart to kind of pull some things that maybe had not been used before, but that still felt intrinsically Star Wars, and the Vector is a great example of that. And so it was really, you see it really briefly, I believe in the first episode of Acolyte too, in live action. And then I think the kids learn how to fly in it or in a slightly altered version as well in Young Jedi
mm,
Adventures. And so I was hoping to see more of it in Acolyte actually, because it's on the poster, I think, too. And I was like, ooh, cool, we're gonna get some Vector stuff. And we didn't really, but uh, one day we'll get a full Vector.
yeah. There's one other question about one other entry that I had. I have
Okay.
no idea whether you're allowed to answer this, so but I noticed that some entries got renamed.
Mm.
Um, Are you allowed to say why some of them might have been renamed
I mean,
from
if
their
you
original
have
titles?
specific questions, I mean, again, it's
Uh,
just the nature of Star Wars
Verse.
and just how things are, and if there are
Yeah,
certain things that have to be renamed or th things that there's also again some of it is consistency sake, some of
of
it
course.
is truly just if a even like punctuation and
Yeah,
capitalization and you know you say I wish I had my actual book. I'm just looking at the actual Google Doc. But like Gorian Shard's Corsair, right, is not necessarily
yeah,
like Pirate Corsair or whatever. And so like you just want to be as consistent as possible because you imagine like if you're in this
yeah,
galaxy, you're in this world, um, you want it to just be kind of as seamless as possible between entries, and especially as a kid, and you're kind of going through things like,
of
okay, let's
course.
let's let's describe and let's be as you know,
Or
as
if it
kind
got a
of
new name later in different media or
yeah,
something.
exactly. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself. You don't want to make the Wikipedia editors
Well,
frustrated, and no, and so
um,
no, and so it is just
yeah,
kind of it's just kind of a dance like that.
it was just Boba Fett's starship.
Sure, and that is
Uh,
yeah, that's just a Star Wars thing at this point.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's because we Wikipedia doesn't know whether to rename the page or not.
sure.
So, yeah. Um, Kind of pivoting to some of your work on the encyclopedia, I'd love if you
Hmm.
could talk a little bit about some of the entries that you wrote, because we're not actually sure what the breakdown is
Yeah,
of,
and even
what was written and what wasn't.
yeah, everyone kind of has their own little sections. Everyone has their own moments that they either feel more comfortable with, or I mean, again, for instance, two of my co-authors on that book, Megan Krause and Amy Rakow, I think are like the experts of the High Republic, right? Like they wrote the character encyclopedia. They probably know more about the High Republic than anybody. And so I don't want to say it would be stupid for me to write the High Republic entries, but I've read all the books and I've listened to everything and I really like it. But you kind of you who what strengths are where. And so with um, the encyclopedia. Specifically, if I remember correctly, I did a lot of Rise of Skywalker stuff, as previously mentioned, and then a lot of the comics, a lot of the current Marvel comics, because I have both been caught up, but I also am really good and really enjoy kind of just I have Marvel Unlimited, and you kind of again if there's a guy's name, you're like, okay, where has he appeared? Let's read every single thing he's ever shown up in, and let's just go through it. And so those were the main things I kind of focused in on. There was some random Return of the Jedi entries I think I slotted in, but really with the encyclopedia, it was a lot of Tross and a lot of Marvel comics for the most part.
It's really interesting. Um, with the encyclopedia, did you have any like entries that you really wanted to be there that you got to
Oh, sure.
pitch?
Um, I don't know if I because there's
Or
always
at
if
least
you
ones that you maybe wanted to write and you told the others, hey, I want to
I
write this
want
one.
this. I've tried to be good. I've tried to be like a good boy of not like, it's just fun to be in the Star Wars space and play in the sandbox even a tiny bit. There were a few, again, I've said it before, but like I wrote the Palmet Warwick entry, which is just like fun. You're like, oh, like my friend had a kid. That's great. Um, there are a few again, similar to what we were talking about earlier, where like there are question marks, and sometimes those question marks can be pitched by the author, right? And sometimes they're accepted, sometimes they're not by the story group, whatever it is. And I was lucky where a few were, and that's always just like a huge thrill because these are tiny, tiny things. Um, but it is really cool. And so, yeah, Palm at Warwick was a big one for me. Kraken, I mentioned a little bit earlier, was fun because I got to talk about West End games just for a quick moment. Yeah, some really fun. Someone's peppered in though.
Really interesting. Did you end up tweaking any of the entries that you worked on, or were they all written from the ground up for that
For
project?
Encyclopedia was written from the ground up. Encyclopedia, there might have been one or two, but everyone that I was dealing with really, especially if you're thinking about Tross and you're thinking about the Marvel comics, like
Yeah.
no one was really that in depth. Like maybe I don't know, like did Sana Starros even have an entry? I'm trying to think of like the
I
last
guess
time that
Kraken
anything.
might have had an entry in the first
Yeah,
one,
but even
but
then, Kraken, you kind of start from scratch, especially with like
yeah,
what has Kraken been in canonically too, right? Everything was canon
right.
based, and so, yeah, you had to pretty much write all those from scratch. Every so often there'd be a little help somewhere, like there might be a databank entry for somebody, right, that you can at least kind of see what had been discussed in the past. And again, for the most part, Pablo Hidalgo's work is is incredible. It's truly, even I was just kind of paging through the Acolyte Visual Dictionary recently, and I not for a project, but you're just like, oh, he has such a incredible understanding of what it means to Star Wars world build, that it makes it really easy to kind of figure out the story he's trying to tell for each of these little aliens, and you kind of build from there.
Do you ever do you ever use Wikipedia to try to figure out what characters appear in what comic issues?
So that is the only reason I at least ever use Wikipedia, not to be like, well, first I check my page, which is very, because there's a guy, and I've said there's a guy who's faster at saying that I have a new article up. I think his name is Lewis R. Is faster than me or Google alerts that I have a new StarWars.com article is because my Wikipedia page got updated, which is great. And so I got an email. And I really appreciate that. I really, truly, unironically appreciate that. Um, the best use case for Wikipedia, again, going back to kind of the thread here, is y'all's like list of appearances at the very end, the sources, the appearances, and that's very, very helpful for me to be like, oh, great, like this character, I forgot that this character appeared in this other comic mini series, you know. And so that's the only use case for Wook, at least for these kind of projects.
Yeah. It's always curious to see who
Yeah,
uses
no,
to figure it out to
I'm
ask.
definitely aware of Wikipedia for sure.
Um, Kind of one of the last questions we have on here is that we got from our audience. If you could pick one Wikipedia article that's your favorite or that you would love to see entirely completed and fleshed out, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I should just go and like kind of scoop around. Uh, that's a good question. I can tell you, I'll tell you I don't know if I can say this. Well, let me say it. There's a character in Andor, because I also helped to write some of the Andor databank stuff. There's a character in Andor who I was able to like name sort of, after a family member, and that would be, I would love to see that character appear in much more for years to come, because it was just kind of a weird joy random thing that happened. So that, yeah, that might be the answer. And then again, the Brandon Wainerdi Wikipedia page, could always no, but it's pretty, I truly remember the first time I got a Wikipedia page. I think it was after my first Insider article came out, and y'all are very quick, and y'all put it up, and I was like, this is the greatest day of my life. Like, this is truly great. And it, because I forget about what you write and what gets published. You write them all, and then they come out a year later or whatever, and you kind of forget it. And then you can go to the Wikipedia page, and they're all there, and it's all cataloged, and it really is kind of indicative of the work you've done, and it really is a very special honor for sure.
Yeah. It's lovely to hear. I was actually something that you said though. I didn't know that a lot of the existing probably Star Wars authors worked on the databanks. I had no idea who worked on them, so that's really cool.
Yes, yeah, there are a few of us that work on Databank, and it's all as a Star Wars, because I'm a StarWars.com contributor, and so it's just part of being a StarWars.com contributor at times.
Are there any that you're allowed to share which ones you worked on, or is that
I
not
don't
something you're
know.
allowed?
I don't
Don't
know
know?
actually. Maybe this is
Because
an
if you,
addendum.
yeah, if you
Go ahead.
ask later on and you'd like us to add that trivia about,
Oh,
whoever you
sure. Yeah,
named, then you
there's
can
a
let us
few that
know.
there's a few trivia like that where, you don't necessarily want to
Yeah,
like break the magic or break the seal or want to brat, whatever it
of
is.
course.
Um, but yeah,
Always
I would
welcome to
love.
add it though if it
I
comes
know.
up
Yeah.
later,
Hey, I'll send an email if I get approval.
Sure. And so the last thing I'd like to finish up with is, do you have any other upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about?
It's a great
Um,
question. Nothing I can like specifically say. I did just have an article come out on StarWars.com last week and this week. It was for the Easter eggs of Rebuild the Galaxy, Pieces of the Past, and it actually went into pretty good depth. I had access to a lot of stuff that maybe wasn't as obvious, or maybe you wouldn't know unless you had like the script or a note specifically. And that had some really fun stuff, I believe. And again, this is me as a Legends kid, because a character says the name Mara in the episode. And so I put that as an Easter egg, and it was called out as an Easter egg that like this could be Mara Jade. And so like Mara Jade is on the official Star Wars website as of this week, which is great. That's not like, it's been a while since she's had something. And also Kyle Katarn makes a brief appearance in Pieces of the Past, and so like kind of
I know
we,
the
we
Kyle Katarn one it was sort of confirmed to be based off him. Was Zamara one like it might be her, or it
yeah, I
was
mean it
supposed to be
is.
her?
I think the way that the showrunner said was how many Maras could there be, or something like that in the
So it's like
universe.
just slightly, not
Yes,
quite,
like
but
they didn't say Mara Jade, but you are like, okay, well, who else could it be? And I believe that was also the intention. But I think it's just a fun, who knows? Who knows what'll happen?
yeah, for sure.
I have a little Mara Jade statue you can see right there, Jaina Solan Mara Jade statue right there. Um, and then I have I believe it's been announced because it should be coming out next month. But the next issue of Insider also has an interview I did. I'm looking it up right now just to make sure it's even been announced. But it was a person that I've been wanting to interview for a very, very long time. And it was very exciting to get to talk to him. So that is coming out, I believe, in October, in relation to a book that is coming out in October as well, if that's helpful. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So there's some other stuff, obviously cooking and percolating, and it's just been fun to play around in the world.
Right. Where can people keep up with you and perhaps some of your future yet to be announced works on social media?
Yes, I am working on updating everything, but right now you can find me at actually Brandon across everything. Twitter and Instagram. I've been tinkering on Blue Sky a little bit. And then Talking Bay 94 is my Star Wars podcast where I interview cast and crew. One-on-one interviews. It's just cast and crew and writers and creators of Star Wars. And so I'm very proud of that. It's about 180 episodes of stuff that is really fun if you want to delve into there. And that also can be found on social media. Um, and I'm looking, and it has been announced. And so next, Insider 234 is my interview with Matthew Stover about the novelization. So, and
Oh,
it
one of the
rocks.
best
It
novelizations. Yeah.
one of the best Star Wars books, one of the best books. I just actually got the Random House just sent me the copy of the annotated book today. I got it today, and so like after this call, I will be hanging up and just like pouring through those annotations because I think that's such a beautiful, incredible piece that they put together.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to dig up some of those Easter eggs, sort of, that were
Okay.
hiding
Yeah. No.
around.
Hey, and we'll see if I can uncover any more. I'll let y'all know, and hopefully I didn't get in too much trouble. It'll be good.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.